Sometimes I'm shocked at how old my kids have gotten and how big they've gotten over the last year. But it also occurs to me that if they're getting older, so am I. And that's why planning for my family's financial security is a top priority. To make sure we're well prepared and to have enough insurance in case something unexpected happened. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it simple to get protection that's right for your family. Fabric by Gerber Life is term life insurance you can get done right from your couch, all online and on your own schedule. You can be covered in 10 minutes with no health exam required. And if you've got kids, and especially if you're young and healthy, you can lock in low rates right now. And even if you have life insurance through your employer, it might not offer enough protection for your family, and it might not follow you if you leave your job. Fabric has flexible, high-quality policies that fit your family and your budget, like $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day. Fabric has partnered with Gerber Life, trusted by millions of families like yours for over 50 years. There's a no-risk, 30-day money-back guarantee, and you can cancel at any time. They have over 1,900 five-star reviews on Trustpilot with a rating of excellent. Fabric was designed for busy parents just like you. It is more than life insurance. Free digital wills, access to investment accounts to invest for your kids' future and more, and you can manage it all right from your phone. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/Esau. That's meetfabric.com/Esau. MEET fabric.com/Esau. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Insurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions.
Passion in my pocket, so my penny should be. What they selling is cheap, so I'm buying that this freedom is free. I've been becoming me. See when Jesus taking the lead, with purpose I bleed and rise like going under the heat. Defeat is a never. You can't reattach with a sever. What's bringing you pleasure can tell you where you stacking your treasure. When storm is your weather, know that it gets worse for it's better.
Welcome to the Esau McCauley podcast. I am your host, Esau McCauley. The person next to me is not the host or even the co-host. He's only the producer. Just so we get
Wow. Okay,
I'm just saying,
Esau.
like you introducing yourself to the guest in the pre-show, but this is
the
Mike.
producer.
Okay, as the producer, Mike, our producer, is here,
Hi, everyone.
and we have a guest on the show. Sarita Lyons. She is the author of the book Church Girl. She's a Bible teacher. She serves in her local church at Epiphany in Philly under Pastor Eric Mason, correct?
That's right.
Yes, and I think you maybe you can get her to come to your space to speak. Do you travel some too?
I do. Yes, lots of it.
And so you got a website, SaritaLyons.com or something like that?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
That's it. You got it.
Pull up the SaritaLyons.com. But before we do that, we're going to eventually get to the subject of this podcast, which is her book called Church Girl. But we have this game that we play sometimes on the podcast called Are You Washed? And the whole point of Are You Washed, this is, once again, it's a young people term. It doesn't mean are you saved.
No, it does not.
It means that do you have the cultural competence to discuss the matter under discussion here? And so since we're going to talk about church girls, in particular, Black church girls, I'm going to ask you to name, you have two options. You can either name your favorite Black female church characters, like Sister Act or something, or you can name Black women who are on TV who you sure went to somebody's church, even if it wasn't depicted on there. So who do you have? Do you have either a favorite Black female who appears in film or on television, or somebody Black on TV who you sure was going to church? The character was going to church.
Okay, so I'm gonna start off more PC, and I'm gonna let you be wild and hilarious.
Okay, let me be wild. Okay. Who did you have?
So I would say, honestly, when I first got the question, I was taking it more seriously.
Okay.
But I honestly feel like Miss Claire from War Room represents the quintessential Black woman, church woman, church mother.
Yes.
Because she reminds me of all of the women that I went to church with that was serious about praying. She didn't engage in a lot of small talk, and she was just very committed to making sure she loved you by praying for you. So I would say that's my favorite.
Okay, then now
There you go, because you are the real, like you're the mature spiritual person here, and you got an actual Christian character who portrayed Christianity positively in film. And Sarita, stay on brand. I will be over here. These are the people who were, I don't know if they actually ever went to church on an episode, but I'm sure they was in somebody's church on a Sunday. The first one that I have is Florida Evans from Good Times. I know that she was in church, and I'm pretty sure, maybe I can ask you this. Was she a usher or did she sing in the choir?
Oh, no, she was an usher.
Okay. Florida was, okay, then here's another one. I was like, what are you about to say? You said more, she was an usher.
No, I'm saying because she kept everything tight. She's not playing around. Yeah. She's giving usher energy.
Yeah, and let me tell you something. During the invitation, what you're not about to do is you're not about to leave. Because if you come to Florida's door, he doesn't know anything about this. Let me explain.
Wow, what an assumption you're making.
Oh, you know what I'm talking about.
I have no idea.
Okay, then. In the Black church, the ushers are the people who obviously help you to your seat, but they guide your interest in your exit.
Okay.
And so one of the rules, one of the unspoken customs is when the pastor is giving the invitation for you to accept Jesus, or when there's the time of prayer, you can't leave. I don't care what's going on.
Okay.
And so some ushers take this seriously. They would sit you down. And so if you had come to Florida Evans' door in a Black church thinking you're going to leave before the invitation.
They would escort me back to my seat.
No, she didn't got to escort you. She said, look, you might leave, but you're not leaving out this door.
Well, no, you know what, Esau? If she wasn't the usher, she was definitely the director of the blankets that got thrown over you when you were praying.
Yeah. Do you know about the blankets?
No, I don't.
Okay, see, this
is good, Esau. We're good for each other.
Then. So the blankets in this is not just Black churches. I think in like Pentecostal or just Holy Spirit churches. Because we were Black Baptists, we weren't Pentecostal. We had the blanket people. So sometimes the person is preaching to you, right? And the Spirit hits you, and you fall over, or you shouting, or you having this moment with the Lord. But if you having this moment in the Lord and you got a dress on, for modesty's sake, there was people whose job it was to put the blanket down.
Oh,
that's right.
And so they just like help you out. And so like this reminds me. This wasn't part of it, but we had this one lady in our church called Mother Glover, and Mother Glover couldn't walk very well. She had a walker, and so she'd come into the church with the walker. She'd kind of come out on the church with the walker, and you'd see her out in the city. She was like always with the walker, except for when Mother Glover caught the Holy Ghost. And when Mother Glover caught the Holy Ghost, she would run back and forth down the middle aisle of the church. And and she didn't do it it was like once or twice a year. It felt like, but when Mother Glover started running, that's when the whole church would just like set off. But she would also, if you didn't catch her, Mother Glover would just run right out the church. And so the person who was the usher, there was someone who was at the back. So it wasn't just like what do you call it? The blanket people. It was someone at the back door. When Mother Glover would run to the front of the door, they say, no, Mother Glover, and she'd run back to the top. So, okay, then I want to go through the rest of these because I spent way too much time thinking about this.
It was helpful because I went to a very white Dutch Reformed church growing up. So I'm very familiar with the dirty look you get when you're misbehaving. But we did not have...
You didn't have a blanket person.
No, if someone raised their hand during worship, everyone kind of was like, whoa, calm down. The charismatic church is the next block over. Okay, that's not what we do here.
I was telling... So I won't go into so many stories about that. I had Claire Huxtable. I think Claire Huxtable, she was probably like the church treasurer. I think Claire Huxtable was in somebody's church.
Yes.
Believe it or not, Claire Huxtable was from...
I know Claire Huxtable.
I'm sorry.
Okay, come on.
I'm sure
I watched The Cosby Show.
Excuse me. I don't know. I think Gina from Martin, she might have got saved after Martin. After the breakup, she might have just said, I need to find my way back. Yes. And the last one that I have, and this is a deep cut, Maxine Shaw from Living Single. I think she went to somebody's church.
And what was her role?
She was like super conscious. And then she got saved, and she was like leading the young people ministry. She was helping college students kind of pull themselves together.
Okay. Well, I have one. I have one because I'm not going to be a stick in the mud.
Okay, you got one.
So I would think from 227, Jack K.
Oh, 227.
Jack K. She was in somebody's church. So, her whole thing was like, Mary Lester Pearl.
Yeah.
So she was probably... in the choir, a soprano.
No, let me tell you what she was doing. She was on the prayer team, but she was just gossiping. instead of prayer requests.
Oh, we have gossipers at my church.
She was on the prayer ministry, but she was just telling everybody business in the form of a prayer request. Now,
and I think Claire Huxtable could also have been the church clerk.
Oh, she's clerking it up. She's clerking it up without any question. So the other thing that we have on our podcast is a segment that we're trying to get the people to allow us to do. It's called Holy Sports. Now, we're not just talking about Christians in sports. No. We're talking about the ways in which what's going on in the sporting world reveals something about who we are and where we are as a culture. Now, I want to do, because the last episode we did this, we were talking about defending your kids because LeBron James defending Bronny James. And I want so much to do a second segment about Bronny James, who finally gets in the game and scores 17 points like this. But I'm not going to do that because then it would turn into the LeBron James segment. Instead, I'm going to talk about this woman named Mina Kimes. Mina Kimes is an Asian American reporter on ESPN. Okay. And she did a 1-minute story about Jackie Robinson. And what she was talking about was because of the DEI initiatives or anti-DEI initiatives that's going on in the White House, they've taken off some of the Jackie Robinson's accomplishments from the website for the United States military. Yes. And so they were trying to say something along the lines of the stuff that he did as it relates to race wasn't relevant to his military stuff. And so they're taking that stuff down. And she took a minute to say, you can't separate Jackie Robinson's race from the actual things that he accomplished. The interesting thing about that is there was a lot of backlash for Mina Kimes because people were saying that a sports radio show wasn't the place to talk about race. And the thing that was interesting to me, and maybe this is the question, so you don't got to know anything about sports, but here's the part that I thought was interesting, is there is this idea that I think that people are getting at when they're talking about Mina, is there's only certain contexts in which it's appropriate to talk about issues of race. And we want to create these kind of race-free zones where we can kind of enjoy whatever we're doing without any kind of complicated emotions. And so if I can ask you this, as someone who attends the Black church, who serves in the Black church, who loves Jesus, who does all of those things, how do you balance in your own life and ministry when you bring in discussions of race or when you leave those things out? Are there places where you do feel like it's inappropriate or you just bring it everywhere you go?
I think if it makes sense to bring it up, there's no context where it should be off limits. Because I feel like I bring my whole self to wherever I go. I think you have to have some discretion and know when is the right time. But I don't think that any place is really off limits for you to bring any necessary discussion that may be relevant based on what's going on or what's being discussed. So I disagree with the people who are coming after her. And we've heard that before with the whole just shut up and dribble.
Basically it's a shut up and dribble.
Exactly.
So I guess maybe, have you ever felt like there was this moment where you did want to say something, but you didn't feel comfortable? You're like, oh, do I want to be the Black person talking about race right now? Or is that just not what you had to deal with in your context?
Well, I don't have to deal with that in my church context.
Church context.
But I have often felt, of course, there are so many times. I went to school my whole life and not all of my life was spent at an HBCU. So I just can remember having some experiences in grad school where I just kind of felt in my soul like dun, dun, dun. And like I have to make this decision. Like, am I going to be the Black representative in this moment and correct something that I think grossly was said or is just misinformation flying? And usually, I have to be honest, that's just my personality. Usually I am the person that will do that. And I am kind of looking around at maybe the other 3 Black people that are in the room, like, y'all gonna help a sister out?
Are we gonna ride or not?
Right. But I do think sometimes I push back on the request or the demand for me to do all the educating, as if we don't have the capability to see ants from the moon with a telescope on the ground, but we can't somehow figure out how to educate ourselves about the history of this country. So sometimes I push back on, I'm not going to do all this talking with y'all for free, and y'all going to hire me as your black coach, your coach in blackness, folks. So sometimes I just say no because I just don't feel like it.
Yeah, folks be like, I need to pick your brain. I say, that's called consulting.
Yes.
It's a fee.
It's called consulting.
But here's something else that I was thinking as you were saying this, because I think it does sometimes depend upon context. Because in the same place that I feel sometimes I'm having to, like you said, work up the energy to talk about race and injustice, I think the same thing can actually be true of Jesus. Mm-hmm. That sometimes I'm in a super social, so maybe I would say if I'm in a super socially conscious place and we all on our pro-black stuff and they talking about, which we'll get to in your book, like all of this stuff and stuff. And I'd be like, well, Jesus can help y'all. And sometimes bringing the person who brings Jesus as the solution to the problem also takes a little bit of cultural courage. So people like, don't bring that church stuff in here. And so what I guess I'm always struggling with isn't just like, where can I bring race into the conversation? Like that's like a goal. But it's like, where am I free to be my whole self, to love Jesus fully and to be able to do the other piece? And sometimes, depending on the context, I have to show my black bona fides so that when I'm talking about Jesus, they know I'm not talking about like the colonizer Jesus, but the actual Jesus of the Bible. Now, do you watch sports, right?
I do, yeah.
So when you have like these moments where something like Jackie Robinson or racial stuff like comes up, does that like limit your enjoyment of the sport? Or do you consider sports kind of a drama-free zone?
I don't know how you could call sports a drama-free zone when sports by nature, if they're good, are filled with drama, the competition. But also, I mean, the Jackie Robinson example is a great example where he was not allowed to play for so long because of his race. Yeah. And so to say that race has nothing to do with his athletic accomplishments, it doesn't make any sense. And I think back to Colin Kaepernick and everything around that time period when players were taking a knee during the flag. And I just remember being frustrated by the conversation because it was just kind of like, well, they're taking a knee. It's about the most respectful thing you can do. What are they supposed to do? If they what do you want from them?
I think that sometimes the goal is you can talk about race or injustice when people are least paying attention. Yeah, that's the goal, right? If you start saying where are all of the places or ways which you can't protest and you can't speak about injustice, you end up being limited to a time where nobody's paying attention. Because some would even say, well, don't bring this into the church because we're doing Jesus, right? Or don't bring it to sports because we're doing there. Don't bring it into politics. Well, what's left, right? Right. Like here's a meeting to talk about race to the people who are already convinced come. Now, right. Sarita, we did not invite you onto the podcast to give us your sports takes, even though I think they're legitimate. Do you have a favorite sport, by the way?
Oh, well, football to watch. Okay. Football to watch. And that's been really big right now with the Philadelphia Eagles.
Oh my goodness.
Having just won the Super Bowl. If I could just do a shameless plug, go Birds.
I should ask you a Philadelphia Eagles question. So,
Philadelphia Eagles, we've kind of had those discussions going on about race and politics and sports, because when the team said we're not going to the White House, people were like, yeah. And then we started hearing rumblings that people were going to the White House and people were like, no, don't do that. Yeah. Stand up, represent, you see people using main stage moments where people have influence. They're leveraging influence in many ways to not say certain contexts are off limits. We need to have these hard discussions.
So we're actually here to have you talk about your book, Church Girl, a gospel vision to encourage and challenge Black Christian women. I'm going to show it to the people here. I said this off mic, but I'm going to say this on mic. When I saw this book, I said, I need to get this for my daughter. Mm. She's 14 now. I gave it to her when it first came out. And it was, you go on later to say in this book, this is the book that I wish I had when I was in college. And I want to say, I'm glad this is the book that my daughter has to take with her to college when she finally gets ready to go. So this is a blessing.
Thank you.
If y'all check out for the rest of the podcast, which I hope you don't, I want to say, take a moment to read it. So in the book, you do talk about basically like what the subtitle says, a gospel vision to encourage Black Christian women. So the book is focused. This is the book to encourage Black Christian women. But I want to talk about what you say in the early parts of the book is that you were raised in the church, if I get this correct, right? And then you went to college and you went to an HBCU.
Yes.
But this isn't unique to HBCUs. It can happen in PWIs. For those who don't know, HBCUs, historically Black colleges, universities. PWIs was it majority? I don't even know what the PWI is.
Predominantly white institution.
I was thinking the first one, predominantly white institution. There we go. And so this identity crisis happens not just at HBCUs. It happens in Christian schools, PWIs, everywhere. Mm-hmm. But you talked about like struggling with your identity as being like Black and Christian and trying to find the reconciliation between those two things. Can you say a little bit about what that was like for you when you went to college?
Sure. And I would say it didn't necessarily start off as a struggle.
Okay.
It was more so I was just exposed to so much about my culture. You go to a HBCU and Black pride is on display in many of the most beautiful ways. And so I think I came in as a Christian, born and raised, grew up in the church, never had any questions about the legitimacy of my faith, but I started getting exposed to the parts of my culture that were pre-civil rights movement, so to speak. So I started learning about Africa. My parents had taught me a lot about what happened once our people came to the United States through the transatlantic slave trade and post that. But I didn't really know much about what it was like to be an African and what our communities were like in Africa and what our religious practices were for many people and so forth and so on. And so as I began to learn those things, I have to admit, though, one of the things people don't often talk about when they begin to drift from the faith is that sometimes the enemy uses our own unrepentant sin to be the fertile ground where he begins to drop lies and develop strongholds. And so I think just by me getting off track as a believer and as a Christian, while also exposing myself to so many untruths about the faith and lies about what was real or appropriate, meaning what people were saying was an appropriate way to live and think and practice spirituality as a descendant of Africa, I just got really, really fascinated by the Orisha and Kemet and studying Egyptology and all of those things, in addition to navigating, a lot of church hurt that I hadn't even processed or understood as church hurt. So I think my drift was an intersection of lots of different things that became a perfect storm for me to really begin to turn my back on the Lord.
I'm glad that you said that, because what I often say to people is we pretend that our intellectual struggles happen in a vacuum. And so when I went to college, it was the first time I was away from home. I grew up as a church kid. And everybody's smoking, everybody's drinking, everybody's doing all of this other stuff. And so it's not like there's at least for me, I'll put it just for me. It's not like these are two equally good options, that if I can find a way to intellectually justify my sin, then that gives me an excuse to walk away from the church. And so it's not like I'm not reading conscious literature. I'm reading the Bible isn't true. I'm reading kind of academic critiques of Christianity. But I'm reading those academic critiques of Christianity in the context of the fraternity party on Friday night. So it's not like, it wasn't like, oh, I'm just happy and I'm just seeking the Lord. And so I do think that we sometimes don't always take into consideration the ways in which our own desire to, at least especially people who are raised in the church, sometimes our own desire to explore what life might look like without God that might influence our intellectual journeys. Now,
absolutely.
Now, I do want to say this, though. I think that maybe because it's the timing, there are these moments, though, and it seems like it's a natural part of African American development that you got to go through your conscience phase, where you're trying to figure out what does it actually mean to be Black. I know you said that it's the sin that was going on, but I was thinking about when I was in high school, we had a Back to Africa thing where we was wearing the medallions. And so we started wearing dashikis, and we didn't really know anything about African culture in a real way, between Nigeria, Uganda. So we just had an amalgam of things that just seemed Black. They didn't even go together. It was a bit of Egypt, a little bit of this. And so it felt like because we were experiencing, this is the 80s and 90s, the war on drugs. And it feels like anytime there's a rise in anti-Blackness, it sometimes leads to a desire to kind of find out the truth. Was any of that motivating you? Because while you're in college, was there something going on in the culture? Was this completely in kind of related to your own stuff and what's going on at HBCU?
Yeah, no, I think for me, it was actually naivete and ignorance around getting involved in syncretism.
Yeah.
Because I really didn't just say, I don't want to have anything to do with Jesus. I mean, I had an altar in my house to the ancestors and a Bible was on it.
Yeah.
So I hadn't actually said to myself, I don't want to have anything to do with Jesus, but I was trying to figure out what it meant to be both Christian and also hold on to my culture as someone who's a descendant of Africa. Yeah. And so I think the syncretism is what began to kind of get me off track. Yeah. And when you're in kind of the Black conscious community, if you and your friends are just trying to like be pro-Black and excited about your culture without teachers, I think you can have a different experience because you're kind of fumbling through it. Yeah. I was actually around people who were in essence discipling me away from the Lord. Okay. And so I think that's a very different kind of thing. And so for me, it was also being lonely, being away from home, wanting community. Yeah. And so I quickly discovered, you know, I don't not believe in Jesus, but if I want to have them, if I want to have this fellowship, when I show up, Jesus can't show up. Yeah. And I just think, you know, the devil slow walks us away from the faith. It's not like an overnight experience. Yeah. And so with syncretism, with my own unconfessed sin, because who wants to believe in a God that's going to convict you of all the dirt that you're doing? So it was just easier to begin to disbelieve the tenets of the faith and the legitimacy of the Bible when I wanted to live the way I wanted to live. Yeah. And I had all of these untruths feeding my own selfish desires and ego. And here's a key thing, because I'm so passionate about discipleship. I never thought to wrestle with any of these issues with other believers. Yeah. It was like I literally just switched camps.
So it's so funny you said that. Like I have people who come to me, I'm a professor, and they have these intellectual like questions about Christianity, even issues of syncretism. And I say to them, have you read the best Christian books or the best Christian thoughts? Or have you actually talked to a mature believer about it? In other words, it's sometimes the lack of discernment that we sometimes exercise. But I don't want to be too critical, because I think that you mentioned something else that I thought was really interesting, was the community. Mm-hmm. And that when we are lonely, sometimes any community will do. And part of what makes the church a family, and part of what makes the church a viable community of faith across time and across culture, is that you don't have to do this Christian walk alone. One of the things that people say, I can worship God anywhere, I can do this on any kind of Sunday, blah, blah, blah. But what you don't understand is it's precisely the testimony of other believers with you who are in your life, who are making these things possible. And so like stuff like small groups, all of the, so you end up drifting away. I don't want to have to tell the whole story, but you end up coming back. Can you just say a quick moment? Because you talk about this in the book. Don't give them everything, but just say a little bit about this thing that brings you back into the church, and then we'll get into some of the content of the book itself.
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that I actually don't write in the book that I think is important, because I talk about this one dramatic moment, is that as I have processed that experience for myself, I actually see the love and kindness of God that was chasing after me in a number of small ways that I didn't notice that was God at work. Yeah. And so, and it landed into this big, major kind of like come to Jesus literally moment where I had a spoken word event at my apartment, and my father, who had been constantly calling and praying for me, was someone said, your dad left a message for you, or is leaving a message. That was the old school answer machine where someone actually talked into the message and could run up your whole tape, and the whole room could hear them leaving the message. Yeah. So someone heard my dad leaving a message. I go back to get the phone, and I hear someone say an expletive about Jesus in their poem while I'm in the room. And it was literally like the Holy Spirit said, enough. And it was from that moment on that I threw away every article that represented demonic activity in my life, just confessed to the Lord my sin. I didn't even have all that language. I'm saying that now. It was basic stuff like, I'm sorry, you know, and I had a very raw, emotional moment with the Lord. And the Lord literally, I flipped open the Bible. I have one of my books here, so we're going to pretend this is a Bible.
Yeah.
I did back then in college what we do when we don't know what to study. And I did one of these like the Lord's going to let me land on something real deep.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what I did. And I landed on the second chapter of Jeremiah when God said in his word, I remember you from your youth.
Yeah.
When you followed after me in the wilderness. And that was so powerful for me because all my church girl history, I was the one who almost got suspended from public school because I was passing out Bible tracts. I mean, I was a for real church girl. I was the one who was having Bible study with friends during recess. Yeah. I was that kind of person. But what I discovered when I got to college is that I was a cultural Christian who loved God but was biblically illiterate.
Yeah.
And so I did not have enough truth in me to combat the lies of the adversary of God, even though I had been in church my whole life and went to A service and B service and sang on the choir and did all these things. I was a cultural Christian. And many times we don't discover that we were cultural Christians until our faith gets challenged. But I just thank God for the deliverance that he provided for me.
One of the things that you talked about, and I'm glad it's funny because I know you use the language of cultural Christian, but I'm not even sure that's exactly what it is because I kind of had the same experience, is we have a passion for God sometimes as people, but it's not a passion informed by knowledge. And so because it's almost like I'm really into God and I love God and all the energy around me rewards me for being in love with God, but I don't have the resources necessary for when things don't go my way. And I think that, for example, I didn't have a theology that kind of helped me make sense of the complexities of life. And so part of what you're talking about here is that what it seems like you did is that you had to put the roots down so that your faith could sustain the storms. And that's what you get into the book, because you don't just address those. You know, you could have told this story and been a story for just any Christian, right? You could say, I know what it's like to go to college. I know what it's like to struggle with my identity and then have an encounter with God and then come back. But you then began to address the particular concerns of Black women in this book. What made you decide to say, you know what, I'm not going to just write a general book. I'm going to talk to the particular concerns of Black women who are trying to make their way as Christians in the world. What made you decide to focus on them? But obviously a Black woman. What made you decide to write the book?
Well, because I think that Black women who really love the Lord and are wrestling with our faith and trying to figure out how to be a faithful Christian have for years been buying and reading books by people who don't look like us. And it's not that the truth that is being conveyed in these books are not helpful and even real. But a lot of times what's been missing is the contextualization for our lived experience. And I don't think that that is an insult to anyone. In fact, if to deny contextualization mattering would be the insult to God, because we literally see the spread of the gospel and the growth of the church happening through contextualized ministry. And so really, I wanted to say to Black women, hey, there is a unique way that you can look at your life and apply scripture. There is a unique experience that God allowed you to have. God put you in this body. He put you in the context of being born here in these United States, or even if you're not born in the United States, just because of the color of your skin and the problems we've had with race all over the world, you're going to have a very unique experience in your life that requires the words of God to bring hope and truth and revelation for you that in some cultures and contexts, it's just not the same. It doesn't hit the same, as the young people say. And so I really wanted Black women to feel seen. And I believe particularly Black women in America, the story that the world has told us about our beauty and our value and our goodness and our spirituality, right? And what we can do or not do has not always been an accurate story. And even sometimes that story is not told well in the church. And God has the greatest story, and you have been written in it and been on his mind from the foundation of the world.
In the book, you talk about some of the stereotypes that Black women in particular have to overcome and deal with as they make their way in the world? Was there, I know you talked about a lot of them. Was there one or two of them that you felt like, I really want to set people free from these stereotypes so they might pursue God more fully?
Yeah, I think the superwoman trope is a big one. I think, and we can even trace, I do it in the book, how even the issue and the reality of slavery has had a residue on our hearts and minds around our value not being tied to what we produce. And that Black women, it's not unique to Black women, but we have a unique experience of feeling like we have no value unless we are doing, unless we are throwing the entire family, the entire community, and the entire church on our back, even if it's killing us. And so I want Black women to divorce themselves from this ideology that we have to be strong all the time, that we have to be superwoman. Because what it does to us, especially as Christians, is if you have to be superwoman, then where do you ever have a dependency on the supernatural power of God? And we are called to be dependent on the Lord. We are called to be weak. In our weakness, the Bible says, his strength is made strong. His strength is perfected. And so I really want women to embrace Sabbath.
I was about to say that you went to talk about rest. Go ahead. Tell them to take a nap.
I want us to take a nap. I want us to even reimagine Sabbath the way it's reimagined for us in Hebrews, meaning it's no longer a day, but our Sabbath is a person. And that you don't rest from Christ, you rest in Christ. And so even though in this culture today, there's a lot of talk, and rightfully so, on napping and other healthy forms of self-care, I still think if we don't have a right understanding and a right theology of true rest, you will travel, you will go to the spa, you will get your hair and nails done, you will get your passport stamped and still be a mess and still be unrested because we are not actually getting our true rest in the Lord. And so, I want women to know that God has secured our rest and that Jesus invited us to come to him for real rest.
So I'm not going to tell people not to go to the spa. So I'm going to make sure I say that part, but I do want to say this part, and it relates to what you were saying, is I think that you're correct, because I was talking to my wife about this the other day, that you can rest, but you can't bank that rest. So in other words, if you're not using that rest as an opportunity to reconnect with God, you can be gone for like 2 or 3 days and go to the spa and go to this other stuff. And those aren't bad things. Then you come back to work on Monday or Tuesday and you feel just the same way. But if you could say, I'm going to set down some of the things that are occupying me emotionally and spiritually and say that God can take care of those things while I spend time connecting with him, then I can return re-energized, or not even re-energized. Not re-energized is the wrong way. It's not more energy. It is I have a different perspective on the things that I need to do. So there's been a lot of times where it'd be a Friday and I was like, I need to work 2 or 3 more hours, or a Saturday I do, and then I can kind of get ahead. And I've had to add the discipline in myself to say, like, I'm not a woman, but like, God can handle my limitations. It is a reflection of trust in God to stop doing stuff. And so when I was saying what you're trying to get at, which I think is true, is that it is more than just going to the spa. It is more than just sitting down the things that bother you for a couple of days or for a day, a week, even though that's important. So I'm not saying don't go. I think what you're trying to say is if you don't connect with God while you are away, then you're not actually having the transformed perspective that you need. Now, we have this thing that I talk about that I like to ask my writers. And so this part, Sarita, you can't be humble, or you can't be fake humble. You got to be honest, right? So everybody, when they're writing a book, they have a chapter or a paragraph or something where they said, I was in my bag. This one means a lot to me. I felt like, like, not that you don't love the whole book, but there's these moments where as a writer, you feel like I am saying a word to the church in this part of the book. So I know you got a part. I know you thought about it. So when you were writing the book, maybe I can say what part of it when you said, oh, I can't wait till some Black woman reads this part because it's going to set some people free.
That's a great question. I would say a couple things. So I'm going to be real not humble and say a couple things.
There we go. That's good. Claim your talent. Claim your talent.
But so two things that stuck out to me immediately is one, the title of one of my chapters, which is Blooming in Babylon.
Oh, look at that. See?
I just, I'm a creative and I love words. Yeah. And that's the chapter where I talk about how to, be a faithful Christian, the gospel vision for a woman to be faithful, right? Even though we're in this like dead and dying and decaying world, talking about Daniel and his example. So I just love that imagery and associating the current climate with Babylon and how God has called us to not decay in this decaying world, but to actually bloom and flourish. Because, Jeremiah says, if you pray for the city where I've exiled you, if they thrive, you'll thrive. If you bloom, they'll bloom. So I would say that, but I also thought something that I really, really was, it sounds provocative, but I wanted to say it. And that is in the identity chapter. I wanted Black women to hear me affirmatively say, you don't have to lay down your Blackness to pick up your cross.
There we go.
And so really, I think the tension that we often have in these kind of conversations about race and church with people of color and Black individuals is because of white supremacy and the white supremacy that has bled into the church. We have to just own the fact that we had a season of our history where white people didn't think Black people were savable. Where white people didn't want to fellowship and worship with Black people. That's Richard Allen. Even in Philadelphia, you see those examples. And so even the creation of the Black church was because the church wasn't functioning the way the God of the church wanted it to function. And so I really wanted Black people to know that I am not, and we should not, advocate for white supremacy, nor should we advocate for Black supremacy. That Jesus is the one who is supreme. But Jesus, when he calls you to himself, he does not ask you to divorce yourself of the body he put you in.
There we go.
And that you are to lay claim to your gender, your color, your context, because it is all something God is using beautifully to reach people that are lost, to tell them something about the gospel. And so I don't want Black people to feel like in order to be a good Christian, I have to become less Black. In order to be a good disciple of Jesus Christ, I have to somehow believe this lie that we all should be colorblind. Like, how disrespectful is that to Elohim, a God who masterfully creates color in the world, who said that, when we are all around his throne in the new Jerusalem, in the new earth, we will have every tribe and nation surrounded by there. Why then do we think in order to be a disciple of Jesus Christ, I have to become less of the beautiful body and culture that God had me born into? And so, yes, I am not advocating ethnocentrism of any kind, but I'm also not asking women, Black women in particular, to think that you have to become a shell of yourself in order to serve the Lord.
Now, this is not exactly a fair question. So I'm speaking on behalf of the audience.
Okay.
And so I'm going to question the question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. If say a white guy writes a book, he just assumes everybody's going to read the book. And you don't have to ask, like, why would somebody who's not a white man read your book? But this is a book for Black women, and Black women are the primary audience. I read the book. I'm not a Black woman. I got a lot from it. Maybe I should ask you this question. For the non-Black women who may be listening to this podcast, what are they going to get out of the book? I know the answer, but I'm going to give you a chance to say what you want to say.
Yeah. Well, what I can say now that the book has been out since August is what they've said.
There we go. There we go. That's good.
And so Black, white women, Asian women, Hispanic women have reached out to me and said, thank you for writing this book. It was, they have said it's a rich lesson on really what it just means to be a good, faithful woman as a disciple of Jesus Christ. But they also appreciate being able to peer into the experience and lives of their sisters, because we say we are the body of Christ. And so it is an education, and it is, in my opinion, a gracious invitation to learn something about someone you're doing life with, someone who is a part of God's kingdom.
Yeah.
And I think that if we're going to practice the one another's well, it's important to not navel gaze.
There we go.
And think that your life and your experience is the standard. Yeah. But there are other people who don't look like you, who have not been raised the way you have been raised and have not had the experiences that you have, that have a unique story of faith. And you want to know their story too, because that's also part of God's story.
I want to encourage everybody to get a copy of it. I didn't want to give all of the content in the book. I wanted to leave with some stuff there. Now, we like to close the podcast sometime with this thing. It's called, we're going to adjust it after getting some feedback. We used to call it our moment of cultural shame. And that's where we confess stuff that we haven't done. And so, like, I confessed last week that even though I'm Black, I can't do the electric slide. So that was my moment of cultural shame. But I'm going to give you an option so you can be positive or negative. So it's called cultural shame or standing on business. Mm-hmm. So cultural shame is you can confess something that, you know what, I know I'm supposed to be in the culture, I know I'm supposed to be doing stuff, but I'm just completely out on this. Or I'm going to stand against the energy of the culture and reaffirm something. So I'm going to do the second one for mine.
Okay.
I'm going to stand on business.
Okay.
And this one might get me in trouble on the internet.
Uh-oh.
Because I was raised in Alabama. I was raised in the South. And so every year during Thanksgiving and Christmas, the people would cook at our house. And they would cook chitlins, right? So for anyone who know what chitlins are, they're like pig intestines. And everybody makes fun of chitlins. Everybody talks bad about it. It stink the house up. We did all of those things. But I'm going to confess this, and I'm going to stand on this business. Did I stop eating chitlins when I got older? Yes, I did. Yes, I did. But when I was a kid, did I eat chitlins with mustard and hot sauce? I did that. And was it delicious? It was. And so, listen, I'm not saying we need to eat chitlins today. I'm saying it actually tasted good, and I'm standing on business. Chitlins tasted good. That's my moment.
I've never had a chitlin.
What I'm saying is, like, I'm not telling you that you can start chitlins after you know what they are.
I see.
But if you just raised to someone, if someone just shows up with you and hands you some chitlins and put some hot sauce on it and say, eat this, it's good. So that's my. So,
well, we know he's never had chitlins because he said, I've never had a chitlin.
A singular, a chitlin.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
So do you have a moment of cultural shame, or are you going to stand on business?
I'm going to stand on business.
Okay.
It's seasonal Lent. Easter is coming up.
Okay.
And I'm going to stand on the business that Easter baskets and Easter egg hunts are a good, fun tradition. Okay? I'm tired of these Christians who are saying we got to call it Resurrection Day and there's no Easter bunny, no candy. We're going to be very serious. Yeah. Come on, let the kids have their candy. Let them have their Easter egg hunts. Okay. All right, it's for fun, and we can do both.
Okay, so you are taking your 2 minutes on the podcast to stand up for Easter bunnies.
Easter candy.
Okay, candy, not the bunny.
Not the bunny. I can take or leave the bunny, but Easter egg hunts and the candy.
Okay, Sarita Lyons, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We had a great time with you. Please, if you haven't already, pick up Church Girl, buy it for yourself, buy it for your friends. And she said it correctly, that it's a great study on just what it means to be a faithful disciple of Christ and what it means to begin to root your identity in Christ. And it is true that the book doesn't have to be about you to bless you. And so I want to encourage everyone to take a time to read it. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
The Esau McCauley Podcast is a production of Holy Post Media, produced by Mike Stay Low, Stray Low. If you know, now you know. Edited by Seth Gorvet, like a Corvette. Music by Rob Noor. Make sure to follow the show wherever you get your podcast and leave a review so more people can find it. See you next time. I'm out.
I'm penning these letters with prayers they can aid your endeavors. It's clever benevolence, tasted it, wrestle with, still wrestling. Touch my side and it crushed my pride and told me I'm blessed within. Receive a Christian platitude with gratitude, but in the saddest news I live in doesn't add up to the Beatitudes. Catch me in the catacombs, chiefing like they Pat Mahomes, catching bullets, tackle foes, running plays, defending zones. Field got them doing football numbers, only half is grown. He was acting grown.